Thank you very much for joining this evening, particularly to our Pensions Board members. Always appreciate your insights and presence. Welcome to tonight's Pension Fund meeting. My name is Councillor Ross Melton, Chair of this committee. A couple of housekeeping points to cover off first. First, can I ask all both members and non-members of the committee, before you speak, to speak through the microphones and to identify yourself the first time that you speak. Can I ask everyone speak loudly and clearly, especially for the purposes of the minutes and the live streaming. This meeting will be live streamed via YouTube. By taking part, you are consenting to be recorded. There are tea, coffee and biscuits available in the staff kitchen to my right. You will need a security badge to enter, so do let us know if you need that. If the fire alarm sounds either continuously or intermittently, I will adjourn the meeting. Please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the staff fire exit, which is behind me on my right. Officers will direct you to the correct assembly point on Riverside Gardens. Without further ado, let's make a start. Apologies for absences. I have received apologies from Councillor Patel, who is unwell, and Councillor James will be joining us in roughly 20 minutes. Did anyone else? Very good. And also, joining later, or apologies? And also apologies from Councillor Pascu Toolbury. Declarations of interest. Can I ask any members of the committee to declare any interests? Perfect. Then let's get into the meat of the thing. Eleanor, if you wouldn't mind taking us off on our first item, key performance indicators.
Thank you, Chair. Eleanor Dennis, Head of Pensions at Hammersmith and Fulham. So this first paper sets out the key performance indicators for pension administration provided by LPPA for Q1, the period April to June 2024 inclusive. This was previously presented in the September meeting, but today you will also get an indication of Q2 performance, which will be presented by John Crowhurst from LPPA.
Thank you, Eleanor. Evening, everyone. I'm John Crowhurst. I'm the Operations Director at LPPA. So I'm going to give a brief update on the performance report. I'm aware that both the local pension board members and the committee members have seen Q1. So I'll give a verbal update on the position of Q2. So I'm just going to share my screen.
While you're doing that, John, just a particular thank you to both you and I see Joe joining us remotely as well. Very much appreciate LPPA making the time to join us.
No problem. So in this section, I'm going to cover three areas. The first is the SLA performance on casework. Then I'm going to talk a bit about the employer monthly return submissions, which was a new initiative that we launched just over a year ago. So I'd like to update the committee and board members on where we are with that. And then I did want to talk about where we are with the retirement satisfaction and some of the work that we've been doing around that. So firstly, positive that the SLA performance for Q2, so this is covering the period between July and September this year, against each of the key processes has exceeded the 95% target. So now for 2 quarters consistently, the SLAs have been met, which is a much better position than we were in 12 months ago. So we've got that consistency. Just to give you some context around how that's been achieved, there's a number of things that have happened within the organisation following our move to the new pensions administration system. So you may recall 12 to 18 months ago, our workforce attrition was quite high. It was up at over 30% at one point. That, I'm pleased to report, has stabilised. It's now around 14%, which is great. So our workforce is more stable. We've had some success in recruiting people from LGPS specific backgrounds or with DB transferable experience, which is great. And secondly, we've looked at our controls around the processes. So just to bring you up to speed on what was happening typically for the processes that missed the SLA. The processing would typically happen on the day that the SLA was due. If for whatever reason it failed at the check-in stage, i.e. it needed rework, that wasn't happening on the same day, and a small number of processes were missing the SLA. I'm pleased to report that now we've got some controls in place, and lots of hard work has happened between the teams to work well ahead of the SLA. So we've got that buffer should we need to rework the processes. So that's how that's been achieved. I'm going to move on, and apologies for a table with lots of numbers in it, but I will explain what that's showing us. So when we changed the pensions administration system, you'll recall that we launched the ability for your fund employers to submit monthly data to us. So what happens is the information comes in from your employers on a monthly basis. We post that information to the member records and reconcile everything to make sure that the pension records are maintained and kept up to date. So what we've got here in this table, it shows the level of engagement, I suppose, from the employers within the fund. And I think it's positive to see that we're pretty much up to date with most of the fund employers submitting those files to us, which is great. Those that haven't submitted or are slightly behind, between my employer engagement team and Eleanor's team, we're working closely together to work with those employers to support them through the process. I'll be honest, it's not that straightforward. It does take a little bit of time to get to grips with. And a lot of your fund employers will be working with external payroll providers and HR teams. So, you know, it's good, I think, where we are from a monthly return submission perspective. The next thing that we're starting to look at, and when we move to the a later agenda item, and I'll talk about our efficiency and service improvement program, which gives an indication as to why the data submissions is so important. What we're looking at the moment is, so we're getting the returns in timely, which is great. We're looking at the quality of the information that's coming through, because as you can imagine, there's lots of data being passed between the parties. There are queries that are generated, and what we're trying to do is look at what common queries occur and what we can do to support the employers to stop that from happening. As you can imagine, our preference would be to do that via the system, so that the system does the validations up front and supports the employer through the process. That is a work in process at the moment, if I'm honest. So I think, you know, from LPPA's perspective, I think it's really positive that the employers are engaged in this, and we are starting to see the files, you know, consistently come through to us on time. The last two slides, and you will see this at your next committee meeting. The Q2 performance report will be available. And there's two additional pieces of information you will start to see. The first is a breakdown of the retirement satisfaction. So what we do at the moment for your active members that are retiring, so people that are employed and then move to retirement, or your deferred members that are reaching retirement age and then subsequently retire, we offer them a survey upon completion of the retirement process to ask what the experience was like. We get relatively low response rates, if I'm honest. It's normally around 20–22% on average. So what you can see here is that in Q1 of the 33 people that retired, 22 were issued a survey. So we had 22 members where we held an email address. It's an online survey, of which only 7 responded. So it's quite low response rates. If I give you some context around larger numbers, we're working with other LGPS funds. So if we consolidate all of the LGPS fund member satisfaction data together, which I think is important because everyone's going through a similar process, typically dissatisfaction is as a result of delays. So if the retirement benefits are delayed for whatever reason, we will receive negative satisfaction. So we've been spending quite a lot of time looking at the retirement journey and this concept of no break in payment. So if an employee receives their last salary payment at the end of October, well, the ideal scenario is they receive their first pension payment at the end of the following month. So we've started to measure how many members actually receive a payment within 30 days. And that information specific to your fund will be in the Q2 report. So what we see from that is at the moment, we have asked employers to give us at least 30 days notice of someone's retirement. Okay. And at the moment, your employers are giving us, it's about 50% on time and 50% late. If I compare that to the average across the other LGPS funds that we work with, it's about 35% on time and 65% late. Okay. Now, there's a direct correlation between the timeliness of the notification and the payment date. So from your fund's perspective, the 50% where we were notified on time, 90% of those individuals were paid within 30 days, received a payment. So that could have been either their lump sum payment or their first pension payment, whichever is the earliest. Okay. So if we receive a late notification, only 11% were paid. If I give you again context around the LGPS funds that we work with, for the 35% that we were notified on time, 75% were paid within 30 days. And if we're notified late, only 6%. So there's a direct correlation between the notification, as you would expect, and our ability to make the payments. I won't go into too much detail, but if a member has an AVC and they have a disinvestment process to go through, then very few, even if we're notified early, are paid on time. It adds roughly 22 days to the process. So what we're doing, what the fund are doing, is we're working with the AVC providers to review that process and see whether or not we can speed it up, essentially. So that's all happening in the background. And the last slide I'll share is the same. It's the satisfaction survey for the deferred members. So I would expect this to be higher than the active members because this is completely within our control. So we know when somebody is reaching their retirement age, so we can trigger the process early. Typically, we do that 3 months in advance so that we have the time to trace the member if we haven't made contact recently, get everything we need and set the payments up. So I'll pause there, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Mike Adam, I'm a co-opted member. Can I just add my thanks along with everyone else's for the work that your team has done and our officers have done to improve the performance over the last year. Can I ask you to what extent you feel the improvement is now embedded and to what extent is it vulnerable to tailing off in the future? And what are the factors that might impact on future performance?
Yeah, thank you. So the employer performance is key. So ensuring that the timeliness of the notifications coming through continues to improve is key to the process. I'm pleased that the workforce is a lot more stable than it was over a year ago. So we've got people in with the relevant skills. We've got a pretty robust training program in place to make sure that our new recruits are trained, so that we've got that resilience within the organisation. There are potentially risks if we do receive significant spikes in work. So I'll give you an example. For employers that are not up to date with their monthly return submissions and we approach March next year, we need the data to be able to process some bulk events that we have. So if lots of employers submit lots of data to us all at the same time, we could see a spike in work. And then obviously our resource planning will come into play to make sure that we can cope with that demand. But that is a risk. But apart from that, I would say that we're back to BAU, steady state, and we're focusing on all the things around the member experience.
As a follow-up to that, John, would taking on any new fund clients add to that workload?
Potentially. If, as you can imagine, as part of any exercise that we undertook to onboard new pension funds, one of the things that me and my team, Joe, Managing Director, who's on the call online, and our board will be making sure is that we've got the resilience in place to manage that appropriately. So I think to say that there'll be no disruption at all is probably unrealistic, but it needs to be managed in an appropriate way.
I think we're exactly aligned with you on that. And I think the only address would be if it was possible for LPPA to notify us in advance of any of those anticipated spikes in work. Ah, lovely. Please go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. Yes, I was just going to add in terms of your question around kind of sustained performance. I think I've got a reasonably high degree of confidence in your overall performance. I think one thing it would be remiss of me not to point out is that some of the categories that we do for you have quite low volumes, and therefore missing just one case is material. So it could well be that missing one case means we drop below 95% for a particular category. That's just the mathematics of it that wouldn't happen for a fund that has larger volumes. So I would say that, and I would also say that we learned a lot of lessons when we brought your fund into LPPA that we would take into bringing on any new clients, including relaxing SLAs for a longer period. So it would be quite typical for us to say to anybody that came on board that we wouldn't be committing to any SLAs for them for 12 months, and priority goes to our existing clients for the first year.
Thank you, Joe. Very reassuring points, and we appreciate the mathematics of your early point. It underlines the achievement of John, Eleanor, and the wider team to have achieved the SLAs over the last 2 quarters.
Thank you, Chair. Well, like everyone else, thank you to you both for attending this meeting. It is really helpful. I think in 2.5 years that I've been on this committee, obviously, we've had a good 6 or 8 months of very good news. That doesn't hide the 1.5 years of less so good news. But I look forward to a bright future where we're looking back. If someone asks me, were they good? I'll say, well, overall, yes, they were. So thank you for your hard work. I wanted to ask you about the customer satisfaction surveys and to find out how are they distributed to people who retire? Is it solely by email? But I suppose that some persons you interact with by phone only.
Yeah, thank you. So for the retirement survey specifically, it is an email via a Survey Monkey that's completed for those that we hold an email address for.
Okay, and your graph shows a slight increase in responses. Can you tell us why? Is it because you've changed the way you were communicating with people, or is it just completely random?
Yeah, completely random. I did look at that and I couldn't spot any particular reason. We haven't changed the process or the timing or the approach. So I suspect that is random.
Okay, and just to highlight in future reports, I think it'd be really, really interesting if you could. I mean, there's a lot of detail on there. I don't know if we need that much, but in terms of this borough developing its own digital inclusion strategy, that's really helpful insights. If you can share with us over time how you engage with people and whether that increases interactions and returns, that'll be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Our head of engagement communications would probably be happy to come along to a future meeting and give an overview of that.
And then I have another question that's for you, Eleanor, and this is if there's nothing else you want to add on this, was there any other elements of your presentation for this item?
Thank you, Councillor. No, just that it's good that LPPA are able to reflect on the journey with us because it has been a bumpy ride. And it's reassuring, I think, for me and my team, but also I would assume for the committee and board that there are lessons learnt. And that our impact with them as a client has been a positive one. We've moved forward and we have a good working relationship and we work together for the best interest of the members and beneficiaries.
If I could briefly, Chair, just to support what John was saying around staff turnover and retention. So it's really good to hear the work that's been done to bring that down to 14%. That's pretty much in line with local authority turnover. So again, to give you that comfort that actually that's normal in terms of organisational turnover. Yeah.
Thank you, Eleanor. David. Peter, followed by Adam Peter. Oh, sorry.
There was going to be a question there.
Thank you very much.
That's to
Oh, sorry.
I was in the process of asking a question. Sorry about that. So thank you for raising this, Eleanor. And we know how much work you and your team have put in and to query the true value of what we pay for. I know that you and your team have been essentially lending a hand to the RPPA for quite some time, and you were essentially processing files that often Peter, in fact, were bringing to you, and you were very helpful to that. where are we now in terms of you and your team, in terms of let's say that each week, perhaps before you were spending half of your working time supporting the LPPA, which if we looked at how much we paid for each month, we weren't adding that cost to it. So we weren't really seeing the true value of that. And to really understand, are we now at the point where you and your team are sort of barely spending a couple hours each week, or are you still lending a hand to the LPPA? Because I want to really understand, are they getting to those SLA targets on their own yet?
Thank you, Councillor. So I think there's some way to go in terms of the quality. So myself and my team do have to engage, escalate, and resolve and suggest resolutions to cases. In terms of the multiple of cases, they are significantly less. However, we have had on occasion compounded issues on a single case that would mean that a number of the team have become involved. So we're not there yet in the whole picture. Certainly in terms of deliverable KPIs, that's in a much better place, as we're all agreed. But in terms of quality, there is some way to go. In the ability to quantify that, I think the team would be tapping me on the shoulder and saying, but we're still spending time here and there. So it's gone down, but I wouldn't say it's at a level that is yet satisfactory to the point where we can say, you know, it's minimal. I know it's not a direct answer to your question, but
no, it is absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And what would it take to get to that? Because I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that you and your team wouldn't normally do that, or would you?
Absolutely, we would do that for the interest of the member to resolve a particular issue and to get it to a satisfactory resolution in any circumstance. So absolutely, we would do that. What will it take? I think John will allude to that in the next paper about the improvements that LPPA are making, more forgive me for preempting your content, but more automation that allows then certain individuals to focus on learning and developing their skill set for the more complex cases, because it is the more complex cases that they tend to be issues on, as opposed to the everyday cases.
That's really helpful. And I think, and perhaps Peter, I know that you're very close to some of the members of the unions, and you know personally lots of people who are being supported by Eleanor's team, and that's maybe an area. I know you go to the forum that the LPPA have created where you can feed back, but I'd love to try and understand, when is it that the three of you interact? When does Peter come to you? For what type? What is not working? So I'd love to get into a bit more of macro kind of examples of where do you have to step in, and then how can we feed this back? Because I know you do, but I'd love for us to be able to say, right, Peter came to you with 3 retirements this quarter because that wasn't working, etc. The following quarter, there was 1. Why? What changed, etc. I'd love for us to delve into how do we get to a position where you're only occasionally helping and you can focus on what you need to do.
Thank you, Councillor. I think realistically, though, it's bigger than just ourselves and LPPA. It's work with the employers. It's also internally at LBHF in terms of HR's understanding of the processes. So it's much wider than just LPPA and my team. But I'm happy to share what I can. I think we have to be careful in the open forum about circumstance that we share. But overall, I can start to bring some anecdotal information. That's fine.
Thank you, Chair. This is Peter Parkin. I represent the unions. And I represent retired members and members who are coming up to retirement. This is the most stressful time for our members in all their working lives, 20, 30, 40 years of work. This is this period of time when they're looking forward to a kind of pension. It's so stressful. And when we're trying to support the member, can you just explain to me what happens if you're about to miss a target, where because you mentioned that when a member's going to finish work, hopefully they will receive their pension in the next 30 days. In that period of time, if that target is missed, is there any mechanism that you will contact the member themselves? Or does the member have to think, oh, I haven't got my pension, I need to contact? Can you just walk me through that bit, please?
Yeah, thank you. So typically up until now, it's been the member that would escalate and chase, and that would either be via Eleanor's team or direct to LPPA through one of our communication channels. But when we move on to the next section, I want to talk a bit about automation self-service and the potential capacity that we're going to create to spend some more time doing exactly what you've just said. So I'll just give you an indication as to what I'm referring to there. So some of the complicated cases that Eleanor's referred to really do require one of our more experienced caseworkers to work on it. So we've started to talk internally about how we can deploy case ownership. So for example, if I've started the retirement process for a particular member of the scheme, then I'll see it all the way through to payment, in which case I'm familiar with the member, I'm familiar with the circumstances, and I can be proactive to try and resolve anything that's preventing us from making the payment. So that's the direction of travel that we're going to. And then when we come on to the next section, I'll talk a little bit about some of the automation that we've started to look at.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Can I just follow up on that? Because
excuse me.
Awesome.
Thank you. Sorry, I've just been waiting. I just wanted to thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to say congratulations. There have been good improvements. I mean, this committee, you know, a year or so ago, we were concerned about this. I know you were too. And so there have been good improvements. I mean, we mustn't rest on our laurels, as any good organisation wouldn't do, any good football team or whatever, you know, mustn't do that. But I think it's good to recognise that. And you've heard that from people here. Just on the customer satisfaction, sometimes the returns are low, aren't they, in any organisation, because people are sort of satisfied. They don't bother to fill in. I just wondered whether you might consider doing a sort of target group or something. I'm not quite sure I'm sophisticated how to do it, but just to get a little bit more evidence back from I don't know how you do it anyway, but just to see if there's any sort of underlying issues that are still there or still to be teased out, as it were. But overall, I think I just wanted to say well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I think Joe has got a hand up to answer that particular question.
Yes, if that's okay. Thank you for the thank you, and I'm absolutely with you. My instinct is that quite a lot of the people who are not responding are satisfied, and it would be nice to get their feedback. So we are looking at ways to increase the responses. That may include some rather unconventional testing in terms of incentives or prize draws or things that we can do to incentivize people to respond.
I just wanted to go back to Peter's point, because I think a lot of these pensioners or prospective pensioners are not going to be very well off people and won't necessarily have a lot of savings. And I'm worried about what happens to people who don't get their first monthly payment when they expect it. So is there any kind of sort of temporary support available for people who might? It's not necessarily LPPA's direct responsibility, so it's as much a question for Eleanor here really, is how do we help people who don't fall off a cliff where they stop receiving their salary one month but they still have their outgoings and they don't necessarily have a lot of cash to support themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. In exceptionally hardship cases, we do have the facility to make a payment earlier than we would ordinarily, but it would have to be at the stage whereby we had all of the information, we had an understanding of the monies due, and there was significant hardship. Prior to that kind of scenario, we would work with LPPA to manage the members' expectations as to when they may receive that payment and ensure that the team are working on that to ensure that that payment is delivered within the expected timeline. So we would either work with an employer to get the information more quickly, help the member through a phone call in completing the form or getting evidence of their identity, and also chasing the respective teams at LPPA in order to ensure that the case is processed in time, for example, for the payroll run. Where we can't meet the monthly payment, if they're entitled to a lump sum, we absolutely do everything in our power to ensure that that is paid as quickly as possible, because we actually process those weekly. So we have more impact there as opposed to the actual monthly payment. And most people do receive a lump sum as well. So we're able to reassure them that that there is an interim payment, a one-off payment that will be coming relatively soon, and manage their expectations on the wider piece, which is their monthly pension. Don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ellen. I think the only other thing I would add is obviously the key trigger is the notification from the employer. So one of the things that we're also working closely with Eleanor's team on, and I've sort of alluded to it already, is that for those employers where we're not receiving the information, we do discuss the employer performance, and we've got well, across both teams, my employer engagement team will provide training, make contact with those employers to improve the position, and we are tracking that between the two teams, because that's the key part, is the trigger of notification.
Is there a consistent list of employers who repeatedly and regularly fail to provide that information?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there is. So members of my team manage that on a regular basis, and will liaise with the respective payroll provider and employer and remind them of their obligations in line with the pension administration strategy that has the ability to fine employers for non-compliance of their responsibilities.
Thank you, Eleanor. Can I ask members to note the report? Excellent. Let's accelerate then onto the much sort of hinted at pensions administration update.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper sets out a summary of activity in the pensions administration and operations of the Hammersmith and Fulham Pension Fund, including LPPA's new initiatives and preparation for the pension legislative agenda, and will be presented by John Crowhurst and Joe Derbyshire of LPPA.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask Jo if she wouldn't mind sharing the slides. The first one is me, and then I'm going to hand over to Jo. Thank you. Thanks, Jo. If you present the slideshow, and it will be full screen on our screens. And then if you go to the second slide, please. Thank you. So this is quite text heavy, so I'll bring it to life through the discussion. So I referenced in the first section about our efficiency and service improvement program. So in a nutshell, that's looking at automation, how we can automate some of the processes, self-service for members, for those that would like to go through that process, and then looking at both the member portal and the employer portal. So there's lots of activity underway to improve and look at the functionality within the system since we've gone live. So we've got a big piece of work underway at the moment, looking at the employer portal specifically. So we've got employer focus groups, we've got employer practitioners conferences that we've run with different employers from your fund and others, and we've received lots of feedback on where the portal could be improved, and the interface and the functionality could be easier to navigate. So we've taken on board a lot of that feedback. Some of it's within our development roadmap, which is completely within our control at LPPA. So Martin Davidson, who you will hear from in the second part of the meeting, is our IT director. His team can deliver that, and we're working on the phases of delivery. Some of the elements of development sit with Civica, our system supplier, so it's part of their development roadmap. So the first message from me to the committee and board members is that we've taken on board the feedback around the employer portal, and we want to make it as easy to navigate as possible. And as you can imagine, we would like all of the interaction between LPPA and employer to happen through the portal, because it's just the most sensible way to interact. The second piece that we've been looking at is automating some of the processes. So we've automated 3 so far. I'm just going to talk you through one example of the change, I suppose, in the customer journey. So one of the processes that the part of the process that we've automated is for deferred members that are retiring, and it's the quote stage that we've automated. Okay, so pre-automation, what would happen is we may receive a phone call into our help desk from a member saying that I'm reaching retirement age, I'd like to retire, or we may trigger the process ourselves because we know 3 months' time someone's reaching their retirement date, and then our administrator would go into the record, validate that we had everything that we needed, run the calculation, create the letter, send the letter in the post. Quite a manual process, not necessarily most efficient, or from a member experience perspective, not great, because there's a delay straight away at the beginning of the process. So that, what I've just described, has been automated now. So if a call comes into our help desk from a member, our help desk advisor can trigger the process, and within 24 hours, assuming everything on the record looks okay, the quote is issued online via our member portal. Okay, which is great. Now, about 70% of the processes, this has been live for about 4 months. So about 70% of the processes are going through the automation. So they're passing the validations, the data on the record is correct and goes through. 30% are failing. The 30% that are failing, we're looking at to see what the issues are. We have a separate data project, which I won't go into too much detail around, but Eleanor's well briefed on, which will pick up anything as part of that exercise. So we've seen examples where the elapsed time for that process has gone from 10 days, typically, which is the SLA, to 1 day. So that's just the first part of the quote. We're delivering the automation in 3 stages. I'll try and keep it as high level as possible, but the second part of the automation for that particular process is for the member to be able to complete their retirement forms online. So it's an online form where a member can go in, select their retirement options. It validates on submission, so the member can't select what they can't do. It will help them navigate through the process, automatically come back to us. There's a verification process. And the third stage will be to automate the payment setup so that it gets onto the payroll as quickly as possible and there's no delay. So we've done the first part and we're moving into the second part. So that's just one example. Alongside that, we're not doing this in a silo. We've been speaking to other large DB schemes, and we work with an external benchmarking company who have put us in contact with other schemes that have already done this. So we've been speaking to them about what went well, the learnings, what members want typically, and we've got a member panel that we speak to regularly. So that we're not just doing this in a silo, we're getting the feedback and experience from other schemes that have already done this to take it forward. So it's early on. As we get more data and we see the results of that in terms of the flow through into the member experience, the elapsed times, the more people being paid within 30 days, we will start to share that as part of the quarterly performance reports, hopefully in a way where it's not, spread across too many pages. It's really easy to follow and you can start to see what impact that's having. Just to reference as well that not all members want to go through an online retirement journey. They don't need to. If they opt out of the process, we will still physically post retirement options and go through the process as it was prior to the automation being delivered. And the last thing to mention on that, and again, very small sample size, so just to caveat, for the members that have been through the first part of the automation and subsequently been paid and have completed a satisfaction survey, we've received 100% satisfied. And now it's very small samples. It's too early to say, well, we've cracked it. Everyone's going to be happy as part of this process. But the feedback that we've had from our member panel and speaking to other DB schemes is that, you know, members want things quickly. They want it to be easy to follow, and they want to be guided through the process as they're doing it. So I'm hoping that the initiatives that we're working on at the moment will move us forward from where we are today. So I'll pause there, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, Eleanor, I know you probably know this, but we have a dedicated digital inclusivity group here in the council, and they review when we digitalized some of our services. They'll review the apps or pages, etc. So I know you'll have your QA functions internally, but that could be a great place where we could test your portal. So Eleanor, I don't know if you've ever shared that with LPPA, but perhaps something to explore, not something that I'm expecting to be done by next committee, but I know that they're constantly looking at, you know, how they can provide constructive feedback to improve services. That'd be a great thing to do. And then about the opt-out process for not having your process digitalized, I would think either you opt everyone out by default and people can opt into digital. If I'm opted out, so if I'm opted in by default, when do I find out that my process is going to be digital? Is it upon my quote being issued? Because that perhaps option to opt out could be good if you did it in the 3 months prior. So when you send that person that letter 3 months before their retirement, that's when they can be informed, FYI, your process will be digitalized, which I'm sure most people will be happy with. But some then can get a chance to opt out of that digital process before it's too late, because I know my parents want everything in paper. You know, if I could have everything digitalized in my life, I'd be happy, but it's to everyone's preference. So when is it currently that people can opt out? Is it after?
Well, I don't actually know the answer to that, Councillor, so we'll take it away and clarify the position. But I know that when we publish, so the big exercise that we do each year is the annual benefit statements. So I know at that time we'll so you've got some people that have already opted out, they'll receive a hard copy. When we publish the annual benefit statement online, we will ask the members if they still want to receive online communications as part of the exercise. When they log into the portal, they also have the option of selecting the preference, but I suspect they don't log into the portal if they don't want to. Yeah, but thank you for the feedback. I'll take it away.
It'd be really interesting, again, to find out what your insights are. So on this, don't hesitate to share as much as you can. It helps us learn as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the back of Councillor's last question, the opt-in out is really important, or the opt-in in or the opt-in out, and where that is in the process, because the members who are coming up to pension age, typically they'll be 1960 backwards, if you like, or you know, that's the kind of time period, 1959, 58. So just a quick one. When somebody phones up, as a member phones up, how long does it take to typically answer the phone call?
The average wait times at the moment are 2 minutes.
Right, thank you. And if a member doesn't, at what stage? Because you said three things. You said that it needs to be quick, it needs to be easy to follow, and they need guidance through the process, because it's very, very complicated. This is it just is. If someone says to you something like, I really upset, I don't understand this pension thing. I know I'm coming up to my pension. Is there someone that I could dedicate to speak to about my pension? I'm really worried about it. Who can help me? Is there a facility for that?
So typically that would happen with the help desk advisor. So the help desk advisors have been trained on the frequently asked questions, but back to some of Eleanor's points around the more complicated cases, I think that's where we need to give consideration to referring to one of the caseworkers, or ideally the person that's actually going to be dealing with the retirement process. So I don't think we're there yet, but I agree with you. I think we should have that option really for the more complicated or sensitive cases.
So are we looking for something like, and member, from now on, you'll be speaking to Peter Parkin, and this is his extension, and he'll be guiding you through the case. But would it be something like that? Because that would really, really help the member.
Yeah, so at the moment it doesn't happen, but when I made reference to case ownership, that is something that I see working similar to how you've just described it.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Chair.
These are questions that are about slides further down. So I don't know, are you going to continue or?
Yes, I was going to hand over to Joe, who's going to give the regulatory change update.
Perfect. Over to you, Joe.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes,
can you hear me in the room?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, right. Okay, great. Okay, so I will move on to the McLeod update. So just to fill you in, I'm assuming that you all know what McLeod Remedy is, but if not, I'm quite happy to give an explanation. So what we are doing in line with Remedy is looking at all your members who are eligible for Remedy. And what we've done is effectively put a flag on each record, and that's based on data that your employers have sent to us of any fund members that are eligible for McLeod Remedy. And in simple terms, what is that? It's something called jargon, right? Deferred choice underpin. In simple terms, it's a best of both. So what it's doing is it's looking at the benefits that your members would have got through the remedy period if they'd remained in the final salary section of the LGPS versus the benefits that they get from moving to the care career averaged revalued earnings LGPS structure. So essentially it looks at both of those over the remedy period and applies them. So where we are now is, and this is really jargony, so I will try not to talk in jargon. The cases for the people who are where the benefits are coming into payment now, and that could be a retirement case, it could be a death case or so on. They're called deferred choice cases, which makes no sense to me personally because they're not deferring anything, they're getting paid now. But anyway, I didn't come up with any of this terminology. So for the people that are retiring now, and they've got the McLeod flag stamped, what our system will do is it will essentially run that best of both calculation when it's putting the benefits into payment. And what we're seeing happening in terms of low numbers so far on your, in your fund, but we've had 24 calculations that we have, performed where the underpin has resulted in an average, with 24 across all our clients where we've had an increase. For your members specifically, we've run 20 calculations where the underpin is fired, i.e. it's done that best of both calculation. And we've got 2 members that have been better off. And you can see there's quite a bit of a variation. So one member's £522 a year better off. The other one is just under £17 a member better off. And for the other 18 where it ran, they were better off in the care scheme than they were in the final salary scheme. Now, again, I'll just try and explain in really simple terms why that is. When the scheme rules were changed from final salary to career average, the accrual rate for the scheme changed in terms of what you earn as for every year of service. And it went from being a 60th accrual to a 49th accrual. So the accrual rate is more generous in the new scheme. So what we're seeing for a normal retirement is if you have retired at normal retirement age, it's very hard to escape that gain in the accrual rate. The only way you can do it is if you have significant salary increases in the remedy period. So now, when you start to look at people who retire early, not only did the scheme accrual rates change, but the early retirement factors changed and they became less generous. So the accrual rate more generous, early retirement factors less generous. So what we're seeing overall, when we start to look at the cases that have been run so far, is about 4% of members benefiting. But when you look at people who are retiring at normal pension date, that is less than 1%. But what's making up the difference between that less than 1% and the 4% are the early retirement. So that's kind of just a feel for what we're starting to see from these underpin calculations. And then we have a big amount of work to do to go back and look at what are termed immediate choice cases. Now, these are all the retrospective cases. So these are people that the benefits are already in payment, but they are eligible for remedy. and we haven't processed any of those yet because we've got two more systems drops from our systems supplier Civica that are going to support that retrospective work and allow us to do that in bulk. And we've got a deadline kind of later next year to work through all of those. So that's where we are with McLeod. I understand it's quite technical. So any questions on McLeod before I move on?
I think when this case came through, it was seen as a very significant case, but so far the financial impact seems to be very, very marginal. And maybe you're going to say that when you do the work for the immediate choice cases, there's going to be a huge impact, but on the basis of the deferred choices, it maybe won't be. So when do you think that we'll have some kind of idea of what the impact on the scheme liabilities will be? And do you expect it to be material?
I don't expect it to be material, is the honest answer. I think we're already starting to see what we would expect in terms of a pattern. Remedy isn't going to be beneficial for most LGPS members. However, if we were to look at the blue light clients that we perform administration for, it's completely the opposite. It's very hard to find a blue light member that doesn't benefit from remedy. And it's all about the difference between the final salary schemes that and the care scheme and the change to the various kind of accrual rates factors and so on in that change. So what you're going to see is very different results in different public sector schemes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, similar to that, I think if I remember correctly, we were quite worried as to what the impact would be. And this is also fairly recent. I don't remember exactly the dates, but this whole need to change is relatively recent. So well done for providing us with reassurances now. I wanted to ask you, out of the 20 calculations that have been made, you say to us that 2 are better off. But for the other 18 people, are we looking at significant drops in how much pension they can claim each month?
It doesn't drop. They get the best of.
Oh.
So what will happen in the 18 cases is we've run the underpin. They would be better off with their benefits being paid from the care section for that particular period, and that's what happens. So there is no reduction.
So in terms of our members for LBHF, we can be assured that no one is being thrown into financial difficulties as the result of those recalculations.
Yes.
Good, thank you.
If there are no further questions, can I ask members to note the report?
Noted.
Thank you. And thank you in particular for explaining 2 quite complex issues to us.
Yeah. So are you happy for me to move on to dashboard, Chair?
Are we on to the next item? Yes. Lovely.
Okay. So I'm going to just give you an overview
Is this
of
still part of the first, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to give you an overview of the pension dashboard. I will see if the tech works here in terms of playing a small video just to give you an introduction. If it doesn't, don't worry, I'm becoming a dashboard expert.
Pensions dashboards will... At Currys, we're doing everything we can to help you save energy.
Because when you save energy, you save...
Pensions dashboards will enable users to view their pensions information in a clear and simple way. The pensions dashboards ecosystem will allow the necessary...
I think we're struggling to see the video there, Joe. So
Yeah,
we may
no
have to
worries.
rely on your expertise.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay, where are we here? Okay, there we go. Right. So here we go. So why is the pensions dashboard being introduced? So there's a this is a government initiative to engage more people in the pensions, but also help people to find lost pension pots. And the idea is that we'll all see where all our pensions are in one place, including state benefits and so on, and we'll be able to make more informed decisions about our retirement planning and savings. So engagement is key and retirement planning is key. I'm not going to go through these word for word. I'll bring it to life a little bit. So we will be coordinating the pensions dashboard implementation for you. That we have to essentially plug your data into a central ecosystem. And to do that, we need to use something called an integrated service provider. And we can choose who that is. And we have appointed Civica as our integrated service provider for a number of different reasons. But one of the biggest reasons for that, which kind of touches on Martin's area that he's going to talk about in a little bit, is just safety. We're not moving your data around to anywhere else. So we've got Civica as that integrated service provider who will plug into the dashboard for us with your data. There is a deadline for us all to meet for public sector schemes. So different types of pension schemes across the UK have got different connection dates. Public sector schemes, the connection date is 31st of October 2025. That is a key date. If we don't hit that date, funds can be fined. So this date is really important. Now that's just the date that we connect in, essentially, and have data available for the dashboard. There is a different date, which is called the dashboard's available point, which is the date the dashboards are made available to the public to use. We don't know when that is yet, but we know that we'll be given 6-month notice. So it could be late 25, it could be into 26. So we don't quite know when that date is yet. And the word dashboard is a bit of a misnomer because there are going to be more than one dashboard for people to choose and access. So these are the phased connection dates. As you can see, public sector is highlighted in the middle there in red. So that's the connection date that we do not want to miss. And that's the kind of a high level plan in terms of the data project. So again, I'm not going to run through that in kind of detail, but that we will be sharing lots of information along the way because as the administering authority, you do have responsibility for dashboard, and the regulator will expect to see this as a standing item at committees and local pension boards, that this is on your radar. So we've got obviously detailed project plans. We have a full-time project manager and project team that are working on delivering this in partnership with Civica. We held our first round table for all the funds that we work with on the 4th of October. So people had the opportunity to come online and ask lots of questions and things like that. And that will be a regular piece that we will continue to do, have round tables where Eleanor and the team can ask questions. There are some bits that we need to finalise in terms of the dashboard. So one is we need to agree the member matching criteria. So this is how does the dashboard know when I log in, which are my pensions? And it's going to be doing that on a variety of things. Some of it's name based, some of it's national insurance number based, and some of it's date of birth based. Now, what's critical for us is it's really essential that our data is accurate, because what's going to happen when the dashboard works is it's going to go away and try and find pensions, and it will either come back with something called a full match or a partial match. If it's a full match, that's great because it will display the information on the dashboard. If it comes back with partial match, it's going to flag it to us as your administrator for further work. So we want as few partial matches as possible and as many full matches as possible, which means data is key. So alongside dashboard, we also have a data project, which John alluded to earlier, which is about making sure that amongst other things, we've got your data in as good a place as we can ahead of dashboard to minimise the amount of partial matches that we see. And then the other really key bit for us is how we ensure that we are business ready for dashboard switch on. And now that's going to include things like that we're communicating it well, that we've got the resources internally that we need, and the processes and everything built. And that is one of the more tricky things for dashboard in my opinion. I think that to some extent plugging into the dashboard is the easy bit. That's the technology bit. It is just tech, really. But because this is new and it's new for all of us in pensions in the UK, we don't know what's going to come from that in terms of inquiries. What kinds of inquiries are we going to get because it's new? And we would get members at the minute who, for example, might run a calculation in their member portal ask us for an estimate, and then say, well, why are they different? So if numbers are being shown on the dashboard, we could, and then a member might go online and run their own estimate and say, well, they don't quite look the same. We might get those kinds of queries, for example. And I think the other thing we don't know yet, but we will know as time moves on, is spikes in work are always difficult for administrators to manage, and dashboard could generate spikes in work based on the kind of publicity that the government does, or the publicity that the dashboards do, or, you know, Martin Lewis goes on BBC Breakfast and starts to talk about them. So those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. As John said earlier, we have a very strong network in terms of other administrators. The country that's got the most experience with dashboards is Holland. The Dutch have had dashboards for a while. So we're reaching out to some of our contacts in Holland to see if we can glean any information from them. And we've again got some others in our network who have got earlier connection dates to the dashboard. So they might need to connect in April or May. And we're in dialogue with them as well to see what kinds of things that they're hitting ahead of us, so that we can be as proactive as possible. So we do have a dedicated website page now on LPPA pensions that's got more dashboards information on it. So do feel free to have a look at that. And I think I've talked about all the AVCs is an interesting one. I mean, your fund relatively has quite a low amount of AVCs, but AVC information will be displayed alongside the member record, and there's 3 different ways that we can do that. So we're just working through those different options at the minute and coming up with a recommendation. And that is the end of the slide. So I'm happy to take any questions on dashboard.
Thank you, Chair. Joe, you maybe didn't see me nod very enthusiastically during your presentation. It's really finally the pensions board is coming to fruition. It's one of those radical consumer empowerment measures, I think, that builds on the success of open finance, which is a British invention, yay, but only came to fruition because of an EU regulation. It's good to see you've taken that work seriously. So the first question I want to ask you is, we've talked about resourcing and the impact of large works on the LPPA. Do you feel you're sufficiently resourced to stomach that? It's big. The second question I have is open finance and connecting your accounts. It's great when you know how to do it. It really empowers you, but it necessitates a large amount of digital literacy. Have you got something planned in-house for a sort of dedicated phone number or branch for when I call your helpline to sort of support people with setting up their open banking? And finally, a question to you, Eleanor. In the process of choosing the ISP, so pensions dashboards, there's going to be plenty of them. ISPs are people who just connect between you and the pension providers, and they centralize all the information. There's lots on the market. Were we involved in the selection of this ISP? Thank you.
Yeah. So in terms of resources, then we're currently planning what we think we need. We're about to go into our budget cycle, which will set budgets for financial year 25-26. We'll be taking all the information that we've got so far, and as is always the case, making some assumptions about what we need. It is quite difficult to plan, given we don't know when the actual dashboard available point is. But we will make the best assumptions that we can with the information that we've got. Take it from there. In terms of the digital literacy piece, then obviously we'll be training our contact centre to support with dashboard inquiries. I'm not close to that level of detail, but I'd be expecting that what we're going to have is potentially a different IVR option on our contact centre. So not necessarily a different number, but a different. So we do that currently at the minute with pension point registrations, for example. It's a different option to select that will put you through to someone who can help you with that. And we also, with pension point registration, we do try to help people self-serve with videos and things like that. So if any of you have used our website recently, you'll know that in the contact us section where you can send us a contact us form, it asks what type of inquiry you have, and it dynamically drops things down when you put in the type of queries to see if you can self-serve before you need to contact us. So again, we'll build things into that will say if people have got dashboard inquiries, we'll be pointing them to self-serve as much as possible. But obviously, some people will want to talk to somebody. That's inevitable. And And then on the ISP, I don't know if you want me to take that one, Eleanor. That was a decision that we've taken because obviously we have multiple clients. We're a third-party administrator. So that's a decision that was taken by LPPA. It wasn't a decision that our clients were involved in.
Thank you very much for that response. It's really, really great. And out of curiosity, is there an offline route to setting up a pensions dashboard account?
Is there what? Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
Offline route. So basically, I want to have all the information about my pensions and where they're located, but without a device.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I have to take it away. I don't think so. I mean, I know there's more than one dashboard. So obviously Maps is going to be providing one of them. The other thing is my understanding of how it works is that you don't create an account because it doesn't want to hold any data anywhere. So it's not a database as such. It's going to be just grabbing information kind of real time for you, but there's still work to do on the ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, thank you. And for everyone's interest, this isn't down to LPPA. This is regulation that sets that up. So it's not you, but it's just out of curiosity. Again, I think particularly on the engagement you're gonna put out, comms, etc. Don't hesitate to CC us into all these things, how you're going to be engaging with members to prepare them ahead of that big digital jump. That's again really helpful insights, and any data you have in the upcoming months as to uptake and what feedback you get, etc. Genuinely, please send it over. It's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looks like it's a very good project that is progressing well, positive. But given that pensions were so much in the news 2 years ago and since, and the launch for this, I think, is the day after the budget of the new government, pensions are very much in the public eye at the moment, members and others. And I think that I just urge you, when you put up there something about adequate communication, to change that to good communication. I think communication is going to be important with this. And also, I'm just going to ask you about internal controls. Do you feel satisfied that we're going to have the capacity to control these developments in the world that we live at in the moment? We're going to come on to the item about cybersecurity in a minute, aren't we? But I think every time we make a step forward with technology, we do have to really make sure we've got those safeguards in place with internal controls. So just like to urge you to stress those. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. No, I'll take that on board. I think there has been quite a lot of conversation in our sector, with certainly around the capacity for fraud on the dashboard. You know, particularly when you get a partial match. So, you know, what happens if somebody has run a phishing campaign and manages to get some of your information? You know, can they just then log onto the dashboard and start pretending to be you, get and access all your pensions? There has been quite a lot of conversation about that. So I know the dashboard program is really keen to ensure that we do put in as many safeguards as possible to prevent that from happening.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to hear that you are engaging with communication tools like videos and things, because it's really, really important that the members, the customers, come along with the journey with you. As an example, I took my daughter went to Malta a few weeks ago, and when I was taking her to Stansted Airport, I couldn't get my head around how she just had to click this and click that and click that to go, and I just couldn't take it in my head. I wanted to see paper, I wanted to see the person at the check-in thing, and I wanted to see the bag put on the thing, and she's like, "No, Dad, that's like this." So for people like me, I need to be brought along. You know, there's some people like me, and she's just like, "Oh God, Dad, please," you know. So I am really pleased that that those kind of considerations are being thought of. And to Councillor's point as well, because we're the union, I'm talking about my union. If you can copy us into communication tools, we can disseminate that. We can hold our little sessions as well when we have our surgeries, because we have surgeries as well. And we can say, look, if you're coming up to pension age, click on this video, look at that. These are really good. They can get people kind of into the style of thinking about their pensions, because this is what we're trying to do anyway. You know, when people have got their last 3, 4, 5 years of, and they're starting to think of options. So if you can copy us in, and the committee, because the committee is wide and vast, and they have lots of other subgroups that they mention and they work with. So that would be really helpful. So thank you. It's good work, actually. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Parkin. Just to add, we have launched, just LBHF as a fund, some pre-retirement courses run by a third party that have had pretty much 99% positive feedback that help people understand that journey into retirement. So separate from LPPA, they focus on LGPS members, because we do have some teachers' pension members, and telling them about the journey, what's involved in the process. So it's detached from the emotion of, you know, whatever their feelings are about LPPA. And just to go back to the dashboard piece, I think part of the reason that a go live date hasn't been set is because all of the nuances about how to communicate with individuals and how they can safeguard that information are still being thought through. As Joe said, it's not going to be a database. It is a link, a drop down. Those mismatches are really one of the most complicated pieces, because, as John alluded to, it's very easy for a pension fund to hold slightly incorrect data, such as the wrong date in somebody's date of birth, the wrong digit in somebody's NI number. And actually that could mean that the wrong person gets access to that data. So this is a huge undertaking. It's mainly the Scandinavian countries that have gone live, and there's been a lot of work gone on in terms of communication, learning and understanding the impact of that launch, which is why it's kind of baby steps over here as to that going live. Which Joe said could be well into the future, but it's more about, let's get to the point where everybody has got their data in a place that then allows us to move forward with actual accessing that data.
Excellent. Thank you for that additional piece of context, Eleanor. Now, apologies to members that I jumped the gun a little bit on closing out item 4, unless there are any further queries. Can I ask members to note the report? Lovely. Let's progress on to item 5 with the business continuity plan. Can I ask Eleanor to introduce the open segments of this?
Thank you, Chair. So in the event of extreme circumstances, such as flood, fire, pandemic, IT outage, would impact the availability of the pension administration services to our members and stakeholders, and a BCP would come into action. So the paper sets out the business continuity plan for LPPA, who provide administration service for the fund, and will be presented by Martin Davidson via Zoom. In addition, there is a second paper in the exempt on cybersecurity. So in line with all pension funds, the fund is the Hammersmith and Fulham Pension Fund is a potential target of cyber attacks that could threaten the confidentiality, integrity and availability of data and systems, as well as cause disruption. So the paper sets out an overview of cybersecurity activity and LPPA's mitigation, and again will be presented by Martin Davidson. And then the third paper is a paper on cessations that sets out the detail of a fund employer, B Services Vanessa Nurseries, who has been in the fund since November 2020 and has now ceased fund services.
Excellent. Can I ask members then to agree to move into exempt appendices At the advice of officers, I'd like to invite our co-opted board members to remain with the exempt dependencies because of the relevance of the discussion, if you're comfortable to remain. Very good. Exceptional, Andy. That's the right attitude. Committee members, we have to move into exempt. Excellent. Then I think